Appreciate that. Okay, if I can have your attention for a moment, especially for those who are in the class, okay? I just have a couple of things I need to announce before we get started. Welcome to Convocation today, October 21st, 2021. We're so happy today to welcome Taryn Hiatt, who is our speaker. However, I will not be actually introducing Taryn. I'm actually going to introduce the introducer. Uh, Jen Cook, who is a friend of Taryn's, is actually going to be introducing her. Jen, I think you all know, is a great educator and advocate, and you might know her husband, the president of Snow College. So Jen, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here, and welcome to everybody online. I am going to read this, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my friend Taryn. As a dedicated advocate, Taryn shares her story and passion to give hope and educate our communities about suicide. She is a survivor of her own attempts, as well as a survivor of suicide loss, losing her father, Terry Aiken, on October 5th, 2002. Taryn is a founding member of the Utah chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and currently serves as the area director for Utah and Nevada. Taryn is a certified safeTALK, QPR, and mental health first aid trainer, facilitating hundreds of seminars to many different groups. Taryn is a passionate advocate for change and has been featured in both U.S. News and the Huffington Post. She has testified before congressional members in Washington, D.C. to increase awareness and support for better access to mental health services and to promote healthy discussions about suicide. She is widely respected throughout Utah for her hard work and dedication to saving lives. Taryn has applied for the Master's in Social Work program at Utah Valley University to complete her goal of working with those at risk directly. And yes, so I've known Taryn for a long time, and as a previous administrator in K-12, unfortunately, this is a subject that we discuss a lot, and I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, have been touched by struggles with mental health or with suicide. And I have watched Taryn over many years do really extraordinary work, educating, advocating for awareness, and I'm just so inspired by the work that she has done. She's become a dear friend over time, and we are truly so lucky to have her here to talk to us today. So please give her a very warm welcome, Taryn Hiatt. Yeah, you okay? I love you. Thank you. Mwah. All right.
Is this thing on? Turn it up if you can. It is an honor to be here with you today. Don't mind my hip. I'm about to get a new one. Woohoo! On November 15th, I'm going to be even more bionicle than I already was. But yeah, my name's Taryn Hiatt, and I get the pleasure of working in suicide prevention every single day. Oh my gosh, I never thought that would be on my list of things to do when I was a kid. But you guys, thank you for getting me out of my house, getting me off Zoom, making me wear real pants, not stretchy ones, although I'm sure I'll put my stretchies on as soon as I get back home. But as Jen mentioned, you know, I get the privilege right now to work for a really unique organization. It's called the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's an organization that I found when I sat at my computer 19 years ago. Now, this was back in the day of AOL dial-up. So some of you have no clue what that is, but come on, hook a sister up. Who remembers AOL dial-up? Thank you. It's when we would be in these creepy chat rooms, and you'd dial up to your internet by your phone that was attached to the wall, and if anybody got on the phone, it kicked you out, right? And you're like, yeah, and you had to start all over again. But we had just lost our dad to suicide, and we were grappling with, you know, what do we tell people? Because people definitely were like, you can't tell the truth. You're going to learn real quick, man, I'm a truth teller. Because I don't know any other way to live. And I said, yeah, we are going to tell the truth because we can't keep hiding, right, what had happened. And so as I sat at my computer, I came across this organization and learned that it was a national nonprofit that was doing the bulk of the work around the United States to prevent suicide. And yet, Utah didn't have a chapter. The other thing you're going to learn about me is I'm a doer. So if you're one of those that just sits on your social media and complains, that's not me. If I see a problem, I want to take action, okay? And that's because, I don't know any other way to live. I want to change the trajectory that we're seeing in our state and in our nation. And you guys, we're in the throes of a mental health crisis in the United States. That's no joke. And that was the benefit of COVID. And let me explain that when I say that was the benefit. The pandemic, for the first time, put all of us on a really level playing field. Meaning that some of us who'd maybe never experienced depression, anxiety, stress, and some things, felt it last year. How many of you struggled during the pandemic last year with your mental health? Like you recognized that things were rough. And it was the first time we saw, discussions happening frequently at a national level that said, hey, we got to do something about it. I mean, I'm over here like I've been talking about this crap for years, but glad y'all finally came along, right? And so what I want to do with you today is I want to talk to you about what we've learned and what we know so that we can decide what we do next, okay? Because here's the other thing. I got to meet your wellness center folks, and they're doing their best to meet the needs of the students here at Snow who are struggling. But right now we're waiting. We're seeing that all across the state. Has anybody here ever tried to get into a mental health professional and had to wait for weeks or months? Like, let's just think about that for a minute, how screwed up that is. If I go to the emergency room and I'm having a heart attack, do they tell me, I'm sorry, I can't get you into a cardiologist for 6 months? No. How many of you have ever been in a life and death crisis and been told that you're going to have to wait 6 months to get help? Because I have. Okay, and again, we're not going to fix that provider shortage right now, so we got to look at what are some other things we can do. And so as was mentioned in my bio, yes, we lost our dad, but I'm also somebody who's been there, okay? I am no stranger to suicide. When I was a 8-year-old little girl, I underwent that ritual that most of us, if we grew up in Utah and we participate in the, dominant religion or whatever we want to call it, I got baptized, washed clean of all my sins, as if I had committed so many by then, right? And it was not very long after that I started being sexually abused. Now, that experience was one that I knew shouldn't be happening. It was a family friend. It was a female. It was somebody who's supposed to care for me and didn't. Did I tell? Hell no. Because I already felt all this guilt and shame because, again, I knew that this experience shouldn't be, and who am I going to tell? And if I tell her, are they going to believe me? Right? Be brave. Because 1 in 3 people in the state of Utah have been sexually abused in their life. If you're one of those survivors, raise your hand. I see you. Okay, I see you. And that event doesn't define us, does it? But I let it for a long period. When I was 12 years old, I had my first suicide attempt that ended me up in a psych facility. Don't worry, I had a few more of those fun adventures. But you know, I am so dang grateful that I never died all those times I tried. Because here's what I know about suicide. It is a damn thief. It robs you of an opportunity to stand back up, to face whatever it is that you thought you couldn't walk through, because nobody would get it. Nobody understood. Nobody had been where you've been. Come on, who's had these feelings? It's not just me, right? And that's what our brain does to us. It will lie and it will have us believe that again, we're not going to make it through. And yet, I promise, if we were to all come up here and throw down that dirty little secret that you're holding on to, the thing that you think if anybody knew, guess what? Number one, they're all going to stink, right? And most of us would probably pick up our own versus what somebody else has had to carry. And the other thing we would see is that, guess what? I am not alone. I'm not alone. Okay, the God I believe in is different than the God I grew up with. I don't practice a religion today, and that is for my own sanity and my own sobriety. But I do believe in God. I have a relationship with my higher power that I lean on because it's the only way I know how to not put another drug or drop of alcohol or some other mind-altering substance in my body, because that's what I did. That's how I coped with life. Anyone else? Come on, I was the only one smoking wacky weed and drinking alcohol? Come on, thank you. Hook a sister up. Don't make me feel like I'm the only one up here. And maybe some of y'all still doing it. It's okay. We can talk about it. But you know, when my suicide attempt happened, that was when I finally told the secret, right? I finally told my family. I got it out. How do you think I felt? Good. Who in here's ever released something really powerful that you were holding on to? And we feel good, right? I joke that it's an emotional dump. That's how we feel after we relieve ourselves of other stuff. We feel good because it no longer has this power over us, okay? But then again, because maybe people around me didn't know how to support me. You know, even my own parents didn't know what to do with that information. And it's not like they were mean or cruel. But have you ever had your parent respond in a way to something that you did that wasn't helpful? Yeah, right? And you're over here like, let me just give you a little tip. When I was pregnant, and I've done that a few times, we'll talk about that, I got this book that said, what to expect when you're expecting. But nobody gave me a damn book that said what to expect the rest of this kid's life and how to not screw them up and do a good job, okay? So trust me, as a parent, I've also made horrible mistakes. Horrible mistakes. But we have to learn how to move through it, right? And did. Drugs and alcohol did. It became my way of coping. Because I was introduced to morphine at the age of 12. I had scoliosis. My whole back is metal. I don't just have great posture. I told Jen, I'm like a scarecrow hanging on a frickin' pole. I can't bend even if I want to. Why do you think I'm getting a new hip? Okay? And so I had this chemical rush through my veins that instantly took away all that stuff that I felt. And I didn't have to deal with it anymore. But fast forward, June 23rd, 2013 is my sobriety date. It means it took me a long time, guys, to quit drinking a bottle of Jaeger a night. There's a reason it has that symbol on the front that says, oh, dear God, okay? It took me that long to quit using marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine. It didn't matter. Whatever could take me out of self, I did it. Until I couldn't do it anymore. You know, when I was approached to come and do this talk, and again, thank you, Jen, for being willing, I'm going to be barefoot with you, meaning I'm going to tell you like it is, because that's the only way I know how to live today. I don't live with secrets anymore. I don't live with lies and mistruths, because I can't. I can't. My very livelihood depends on it, right? I lived that way for a long time. But you know what took me to that place in order to kind of shift and get sober was my he's now 26-year-old son, Colin. And I know Caleb in here knows my son. Colin was the baby that I had at age 19. Baby daddy was a druggie. I was too at the time. And Colin was this gift from God that I knew came to me. Because I was on birth control, folks. I was even trying to do it right. And I still got pregnant. Okay? And I know that that was for a reason. Colin gave me this opportunity to love something more than I'd loved myself, because I didn't. And trust me, when I held that beautiful little baby in my arms for the first time, I wanted and I promised that I would never drink and drug or anything again. And I wanted to keep that promise. How many of you have ever wanted to keep a promise so bad you would have done anything to do it? And then you broke it. Because that was me. And again, I believed the lies that we hear in society, that I was weak-willed and I just might not, want it bad enough. And, if I really wanted to, I could quit. Well, I didn't know any other way to live. That's what I'd been taught. That's what I did. Fast forward, I get pregnant again. And guess what? On birth control again. That's why my tubes are tied now. And note to self, hopefully. Watch, I'm going to be that one that I'm going to be like popping out a new hip, and they're going to go, guess what? You're pregnant. God has a really good sense of humor. Have you figured this out? But I gave birth to this beautiful baby girl, Caitlin. She's my 10-10 baby because she was born on 10-10-2000. She makes it easy for me to remember how old she is. 21, woohoo! And Caitlin is my little Mormon, married in the temple, never drank, never smoked, didn't have sex before she got married. Who I wished I maybe could have been. And I never had to see her be treated by men the way I was. I never had to see her wrecked, with the exception of one. Tim the tool bag. That's what we call him in my house. Tim the tool bag did break Caitlin's heart. But luckily it was the only one. And the reason I talk to you about those two kids is those two kids' names are on my wrists for a reason. They're my reasons for living. They're the things that got me through some of the hardest moments in my entire life. I got sober for those kids because I was so dang tired of breaking their hearts. But it was on that day, June 23rd, where Colin had left me a voicemail. And it was after my sister Mandy put out a Facebook APB. Has anyone seen my sister? I hate when that memory comes up because people actually commented, yeah, she was here. And I'm like, really, I was? Oops. Because see, when I drink, I don't stop. I don't know how to stop. The minute it goes in my body, it's like game on. And maybe some of you can relate. But Colin left me a message that night that said, I hope you're dead because I can't do this anymore. And I had to sit with that. I knew that no words I could say could fix that. I couldn't promise like I'd promised a million times, right? Hey, I'm going to do it this time. I knew that I had one option because I certainly wasn't going to kill myself. And trust me, that thought entered my mind many a time. I knew that pain. I knew what it did to us when our dad died from suicide. I didn't want my kids to feel that. Does that make sense? So my only other option was I have to get sober. And I have to show them that I can do this. But again, it wasn't words, it was action. Who's been there? Where you knew, okay, my words aren't going to do anything right now, but I have to, act, okay? And I found myself in the rooms of AA, okay? And I only share that with you because that's where I found a solution for how to live life different. I learned that I had this physical allergy that when I drank, I reacted differently to alcohol than most people. I still watch people drink alcohol, like on an airplane, and they're over there, like, sipping it. And I'm like, dude, I would have had, like, 20. What is wrong with you? You know, when you see people leave drinks around, and you're like the one over there cleaning them up? Again, maybe someone in here can relate. Maybe it's just me. But, you know, I also learned that I had a mental obsession. I have a noisy brain. Anyone else in this room have a noisy brain that talks a lot, sometimes too much, where you physically have to sit up and actually talk to yourself and be like, shut up. Can you please stop so I can sleep, so I can focus? I learned that. And then I learned that I had a spiritual malady. And I'm not here to preach anything to you. I'm here to tell you what I know worked for me. And the reason I started, you guys, with all of that is because I'm now looking at how do we change our culture around suicide? How do we change talking about hard things? And the only way I know to change it is to talk about it. How many of you have heard the myth that we can't talk about suicide because if we do it, people will kill themselves? Okay, guess what? They thought that about sex. How many of you were doing it anyway, even though nobody talked to you about it? Come on, hook a sister up. It wasn't just me. Now listen, there's a reason that we as parents say we don't want you to have sex until marriage. There really is. Because when you've done it a lot, like I did, a lot, it lost its specialness. I then thought that was my value, and that's what I had to give in a relationship. I compared other people. That's never good. And it made me feel less than. You with me? Now, sometimes too, when we're a teen, and again, remember back to high school, when you had that moment. You know, girls, we thought they loved us. And guess what? They were just built a little differently. And we didn't know, right? And then you have this cultural guilt and shame that, oh my gosh, because maybe you had to, like I, sit in a church class where you had the chewed up piece of gum and got told that, you know, that's what you were because you were used. Or my favorite, crumple up that $20 bill and see how it's rough and gross and dirty. But the moral of the story was what? It still had value. And that's true. But again, we try to have all these conversations to help you maybe not travel down a path you're not prepared for. But in my mind, we have to quit avoiding having the conversation. Instead of me not talking to you about sex, I needed to explain to you as a child, here's why I don't want you to have it. Here's what can happen if you do. My poor Colin had to see pictures of like gonorrhea, syphilis, herpes. I was a horrible mother in that aspect. I terrified him. But you better believe that kid knew what to do, you guys. And I'll never forget one day I used to be a hairdresser in my other life, and I'm down in my kitchen doing my little friend's hair. This is me blow drying. I'm blow drying her hair. Colin comes running down. He's 17. He's been dating this girl all through high school, Aubrey. And he comes down and he gives me this look, right? I'm like, what's up? Mom, I need to talk to you. I'm like, can I keep blow drying or do we need to go somewhere private? He's like, private. I'm like, okay. He says, Mom, Aubrey and I had sex last night. The condom came off, and I'm worried I got her pregnant. I've been online to Planned Parenthood. I learned that they have this thing called Plan B. Do you think I should go get it? Now, for a hot minute, I had to go, right? Like, oh. Yep, I'll take you. I'm not advocating abortion right now. Please understand that. I know what it's like to be a single mother without a baby daddy that wants to help me. I know how hard it was to raise 2 kids by myself. If it meant giving him a chance to have a chance at life, I wanted to do it. And also, I was so grateful that my kid could come home and say that to me, his mother. Are you with me? Now again, I'm not sitting here telling you I'm Mom of the Year, I'm not. But I wanted to give him facts. You guys, that's the same thing we have to do with suicide. Because if we just avoid it and don't talk about it, it doesn't mean that you're not thinking about it, that you're not thinking about it, and that you're not thinking about it. It means we're not telling you what to do if. And here's what I know. Suicide's a health issue. How many of you believe that to be true? It's not a sin. It's not a crime. Although both of those things are still perpetuated. Number one, did you know that you used to be prosecuted for making an attempt on your life? It was even an honor code violation at Brigham Young University up until 6 years ago. And not because Brigham Young University is out there saying this is what we think. They just hadn't looked at their code and updated it. Okay? But again, we've typically punished people who felt suicidal. I had the honor, I think I would call it, of being part of our governor's task force on youth suicide. I was like, did you Google me? Because I have a record. But thanks, Governor Herbert, for thinking I'm okay to listen to. And you guys, when we got to that meeting, all of my coworkers at the state are like, Taryn, you're going to do the whole, this is how we talk about suicide. Okay, and I'm like, all right. And why we don't say it's a sin. I got to talk to Elder Rasband from the LDS Church and have this whole dialogue about how suicide's a health issue. We know the causes of it stem from untreated mental health conditions, stress, shame, humiliation, all these things. But it's treatable and it's preventable. And when we perpetuate myths like it's sinfulness or it's a crime, we prohibit people from getting help, and they won't come forward. And I'll never forget, he pulled me aside after and was like, I have never thought of it that way. You guys, do you know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the first religion to do a complete about-face? They came out with strong language that said, we will no longer say suicide is a sin. We know that is totally false and that people aren't in hell. That deserves a round of applause because that makes change, right? That makes change and makes us look at it in a way that we could do something different. Here's the other thing I know. Suicide is a coping strategy. I want you to think about that for a minute. Suicide is a coping strategy. And here's why I say that. How many of you remember learning about, or some of us who are alive, witnessing 9/11, 2001? Remember how we just had the 20-year anniversary and most of us got to see what happened that day again? Do y'all remember when the planes hit the towers and the towers began to burn? What did we see people at the top start to do? They jumped. By definition, they took their own lives, they died by suicide. Yet none of us sat on our couches and said, wow, you're a coward. That was selfish of you. Didn't you know what that would do to your friends and family? You sure took the easy way out. Did any of you say those things? Because I know I didn't. Did those individuals jump because they wanted to be dead? No. Why did they jump? Okay, so maybe they wanted a less painful death? Gonna die anyway? Maybe this is where I choose? Here's what I want to impress upon you. In that moment of crisis, were they desperate to escape an unbearable situation? Yeah. Was their thinking rational? No. Were they problem solving in that moment? No. Reacting. How many of you can relate to your own burning building, meaning something is happening to you, around you, with you, that you just want to get away from? Who's been there? You don't know in the moment what else to do. You don't see a way, again, through it, past it, around it, and your brain says, well, maybe if you're not here, that's the answer. Come on, who's been there? And be brave. It's okay to admit this. That's where the coping mechanism comes in. Your body actually goes into fight or flight mode and says, if you're gone, problem solved. But then again, that's where the thievery comes in of suicide. I just made up that word. Is that a word? Thievery. Thievery is, probably not thievery. I don't like the statement that people take the easy way out. But I do know that we are continuing to lose more people to suicide because of shame, humiliation, and guilt. And the only way we can stop that is by becoming a community where we offer grace, where we offer forgiveness, and where we allow people to be human. How many of you have made a really ugly mistake at some point in time in your life? Yeah. How many of you had people judge you, say awful things about you because of said mistake? How many of you felt guilt, remorse for what you did? Okay, remember that's a good thing. Where it becomes dangerous is when it turns over to shame. And instead of saying, I feel bad because I did this, I am bad. Who can relate to that? Now again, who's a Utah lifer in here? Like meaning you've lived in Utah your whole dang life. Okay. I'm just going to throw this out as a caveat, but do you recognize that we have a little bit of a perfection problem in Utah? I mean, just a tiny, we wouldn't want to get, overwhelmed or anything, right? Do we have a perfection problem here? Yes. Again, we have to name it, you guys, because if we don't name it and own it, we can't do anything about it. Again, it is not a bad thing to have a high standard we wish to hold ourselves to or something we are trying to achieve. But if I do not give myself permission to be human and screw up and blow it and make mistakes, that's where we have an issue. Would you agree with that? So again, how do we change that, right? That's what we have to start looking at. And I don't have the perfect answer. But I do know it starts with each one of us being willing to own where we are, to talk about the things that are hard, to be willing to tell somebody near us, around us, by us, when we're not doing okay, rather than continue to pretend that everything is fine. Hate to break it to you, but even I don't have my crap together either. My sock's falling down in my shoe right now, you guys. I'd bend over, but the hip. I'm just going to leave with it for a few minutes, okay? So when I look at the things that are happening in our state and kind of the trajectory we're going, what I've started to see is this. I have started to see that our state is more willing to have the conversation about mental health, more willing to have the conversation about suicide. We need to destigmatize mental illness, period. Because what we know through research is that 90% of people who go on to die from suicide had a diagnosable mental health condition at the time they died. What do you think is the most common mental health condition people who die from suicide suffer from? Shout it out. Depression. 1 in 3 of us will experience it, and depression is more than just being sad. Depression is deemed by the World Health Organization the most debilitating of all illness. Notice I didn't say all mental, of all illness. And the reason it's deemed the most debilitating is because where does depression reside? In your brain. In your brain. Who's ever been told, it's all in your head? This is where you get to laugh at those people and say, yeah, no shit. It is. I'm sorry, I say all the S words, suicide, sex, and we got to talk about the crap, you guys, because if we don't, how do we move through it? But depression is also the most treatable. But do you know that the research tells us that most of us who live with a mental health condition will wait up to 10 years before we get a proper diagnosis? That means for 10 years we're living untreated. The depression is worsening. It's affecting every part of our life. And then many of us who have this depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions turn to substance because it helps. Right? We call it self-medicating. Anybody ever self-medicated before? Made yourself feel better? And hey, it doesn't just have to be drugs and alcohol. Nowadays, I self-medicate with a pint of Ben & Jerry's. That's the only half-baked I get anymore, okay? It's the only half-baked I get anymore. And again, we do these things because it releases something in our body that makes us feel better at the time, whether it's dopamine, endorphins, right? That's why we're supposed to work out, not because it's fun. I don't know, I'm sorry. Who in here loves working out? I know some of you do, and I just don't understand it. I hate it. It's drudgery for me, but every time I do it, how do I feel? I'm like, oh, that was so awesome. I should do that again, right? Because it releases all these endorphins in my body. I forgot that God gave me natural feel-good chemicals because I've been altering mine for so long, okay? There are things that we can do to strengthen our mental health, but we got to be willing to. How many of you know that there are people in your life who do not benefit your mental health? Maybe that's why some of you came down here to Snow College, is to get away from some of these people, right? How many of you have to live with somebody who doesn't benefit your mental health and you're trying to figure out how to do that? Okay? We have to be willing to do the things that support us and strengthen our mental health, and sometimes it is eliminating those toxic people, even when they're our family. It's called a boundary. How many of you guys are learning how to have these? Okay, boundaries don't mean that you're uncaring or unfeeling. It means that you love yourself enough that you're willing to put yourself first. Okay, and that matters. That matters. The other thing I want us to think about when we talk about how do we keep ourselves safe and what do we do? How many of you grew up with access to lethal things in your home? Firearms, medications, raise your hands. You guys, what we continue to know, and I'm so done skirting around this conversation in our state, I am not against your Second Amendment, okay? You can own your dang guns all day long. I am not against that. But for the love of God, store them safely. Be willing, if you are somebody struggling, to say, I can't have this right now. 67% of youth in rural communities who die from suicide, it's their own firearm. 86% of the gun deaths that take place in the state of Utah are suicide. We can't keep ignoring the gun issue, okay? Now, I know many people were in celebration when Governor Cox got rid of the concealed carry permit. Maybe some of you are one of them. But can I tell you why that was dangerous? And you really need to think about this. For us, that was an opportunity to get suicide prevention messaging in front of 179,000 people a year. Now we have new gun owners who've never owned a gun, never been through hunter safety. Who's been in a hunter safety class before? Who had parents talk to you about safe storage of firearms? Okay? Can you imagine never having that conversation, not knowing, and then all of a sudden you own something? And then you get into a place where life goes, and your brain thinks that I can't do this, and you have access to something lethal. Guys, this is our biggest opportunity to save lives in our state, okay? The other thing that's important to think about, because again, what we often hear is, well, but if you hide the gun, they'll just find another way. Who's heard this? And here's the good news. Number one, remember, we ain't problem solving when we're in crisis. And number two, even if we did, the likelihood for rescue is far greater if it isn't a gun. Okay? We have to be willing to have hard conversations if we want to change the tide. Suicide death in Utah, the leading cause of death for youth 10 to 24, that's most of you. That has to stop. We can't do it alone. We need each and every member in our community to say, when I see somebody struggling, I'm going to reach out and say something. When I myself am struggling, I'm going to find somebody I can tell. We have to quit saying that people who talk about suicide aren't serious and they only do it for. Do you see how you all knew that answer? We are not attention seekers. We are connection needers. Do you get that? Like, we need to connect to other humans. That's why COVID sucked, because we weren't able to be around the people we were used to being around. Or we had to be around our whole family for an entire year. Eeks! Guys, again, we saw elevated risk for domestic violence and abuse in the home because people didn't know how to deal with that. But we need to connect as humans. You need to find, what is your purpose? Why are you here? What drives you? Because I'm here to tell you that hope, even though it is my favorite four-letter word, and you know I like all the four-letter words, all of them. I did real good today that I only said the S one, so there's points for that somewhere. But hope is an expectation for something good. And as much as I believe that hope saves lives, hope is not a strategy. You need to learn what works for you and be willing in those moments to do it. And the last thing I'll say is, again, the God I believe in did not expect me to come to this life and to do this by myself. On my arm it says, I put my hands in yours. And we do what I can't do alone. I don't sit in AA meetings each week and my Al-Anon meeting each week because I'm bored. I don't ever want to be the person I used to be and make the decisions I used to make when I didn't have a connection to something bigger than me. I know today the tools that keep me safe and help me have a happy and good life, even when life goes bleh. But that took work. That took work. I need you to join me in this fight. I've been doing this for 19 years. I'm tired. I don't know how much more I can give, but I won't stop until suicide is no longer the leading cause of death for Utah's youth. I won't. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you listening to me today. I apologize to those of you online if I was inappropriate. I actually thought I kept it together pretty good. So I'm doing this. And that's because I prayed to the God of my own understanding before I got up here and just said again, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I never do. But I pray that you will direct my thoughts and my words. And hopefully something touched your heart. But here's what you have to do. If you leave here today and nothing in your own behavior changes, then we just wasted 40 minutes together. Do something different today. Whether that's reach out, seek help, talk to somebody, befriend someone you don't normally talk to. I don't care what it is. Do something different. Because I know I will do something different having been here with each of you. Thank you. All right, Q&A. Questions. Cheryl has a microphone. We'll bring it to you if you have a question you want to ask or even a comment you want to make. Looks like right here. So wait till you have the mic just so we can hear you.
I just want to hear this from you. What would be the proper response if a peer or friend comes up to you and say that they want to take their life?
Perfect. First thing I would do, so his question, right? What do I say if my friend says, I'm thinking about killing myself? Tell them, thank you for telling me the truth. And I want to help you not to do that. Now, here's what you need to know and understand. You, in and of yourself, cannot fix whatever is happening with your friend, right? We can't. We're not that powerful as humans. Gosh, I wish we were. But you can say, talk to me. Tell me what has you thinking about suicide. What is it that's going on? And then just shut up and listen. Listen. Listen and silent have the same letters. Did you know that? It's an aha. Whose mind just went right now, right? You just listen. Because, guys, again, we've all been there, right? Whenever we've had a really horrible day and we just needed to, like, to somebody. Who's done this? Y'all should have a bitch buddy. Somebody you can just go to, okay? And again, a good bitch buddy doesn't say anything back. They don't tell you, well, you should. Well, why didn't you this? They just listen. Okay, they listen and they validate and then encourage your friend. Encourage your friend to get help. Wellness center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Get yourself the help and support you need. Because I'm here to tell you, suicide, while it seems like the answer in the moment, look what I would have been robbed of. Kids, life, right, experiences. That's what happens to you. You don't get to have all that experience. So thank them, listen to them, validate them, and encourage them to get help. Deal? Looks like we have one over here. You're going to get to be a renter.
Mine was just more of a comment. I've been told this many times, and it's helped me a lot. And it's just basically suicide is a temporary solution, or it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
For sure.
So that's something, because I know we talked, it's like a reactionary thing, but sometimes you're thinking about it for so long, you're trying to logically think about it. And for my brain, that was like the logic of why that didn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
wait. This would be permanent to something that's temporary.
So can I build on that for just a moment? Because I am going to add a caveat, because I've heard that one too. But when I'm in pain and somebody says that to me, how does it make me feel? Do I think my pain is temporary? That's why I'm thinking that suicide's the answer. Are you with me? So it is true. It is true. It's a permanent solution. It is. You can't come back from it. But remember that in those moments, we don't think it's temporary. So validate our experience too. Okay, because it doesn't feel temporary. We don't see a way through it. That's why our brain says, get me out of here. Does that help? But that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Who else? Ooh, look, she's right there behind you.
First off, thank you for not making suicide a stigma. And how do you deal with knowing a person who has committed suicide? How do you deal with the grief of that?
Okay, great one. So number one, we're going to change the language here too. We are no longer going to say that people commit suicide because that is not appropriate for a health issue. Do you commit cancer? Do you commit diabetes? Do you commit diarrhea? I'm being serious. Like, do we say that? No. So let's not say that anymore with suicide. Okay, so we're going to say they died by, because that's true. Are you with me on that? So thank you. When they die from suicide. Number one, please know that we have support and resources available. I've got some swag and stuff up here, but if you were to go to my website, it's not mine, but AFSP, afsp.org/Utah, just afsp.org. We have resources for how to talk to somebody who's lost a loved one. We do Survivor Day events each year that provide support and connection. Go to a support group. Get a therapist. Grief is a beast. How many of you have lost somebody you love regardless of how they died? Grief does a number on us. I know you experienced grief just recently with a student here on campus. Grief is a journey and a process that we have to be willing to work through, and it's messy. There ain't no 7 stages, Elizabeth Gubler-Ross, whatever your name is. It's like, could be a whole bunch, right? It isn't. It isn't linear and it isn't perfect. So get support so you don't have to go through it by yourself. That would be my thing. And here's how you can support people when they lose a loved one to suicide. Show up. Bring them the creepy green Jell-O with the carrots in it, okay? People didn't do that to us. And again, it wasn't that they didn't care. They didn't come because they didn't know what to say. Say something. Just say something. Same way you would if their loved one died any other way. I see you, I care about you, I'm sorry for your loss. What can I do to support you? Okay? Does that help? And I'm going to give you a hug after, if that's okay. I did shower today. Not even a hooker bath, like a real full shower.
Thank you so much, Taryn. We really appreciate you coming and sharing with us. Can we please thank her again? I know that some of you need to leave to go to your next class. You may go ahead and do so. But if some of you would like to come up and talk with Taryn, please come forward. And if you want some swag, please come get some.